You learn how to enter a house without a sound when you've spent 2 decades in military intelligence. I didn't do it out of paranoia this time, just habit. I eased the door shut behind me, letting the scent of sandalwood hit me like a memory. Claire always lit that stuff when she cleaned or meditated. That night, it smelled stronger, like she'd gone a little overboard. The house was quiet, too quiet. Usually, there'd be jazz playing low through the upstairs Bluetooth speaker. Claire loved that old-school stuff. Coltrane, Davis, Chet Baker. But tonight, some pop beat thumped lightly above me, shallow and fast, like it belonged in a club. That was my first red flag. I set my bag down in the foyer, careful not to make the floorboards creak. My boots still had Afghan sand on them. I hadn't meant to sneak up on anyone. I just wanted to surprise them. I'd finished my leadership course a day early. They hadn't expected me back until tomorrow night. I climbed the stairs, trying not to breathe too loud. Halfway up, I heard her laugh. Claire. That high, forced kind of laugh she used when she was performing for someone. It was coming from our bedroom. Then came her voice, clear, casual, and cruel. He's basically just a salary in uniform. He doesn't ask questions. I handle everything, so it's easy. A pause. No, seriously, once the military divorce kicks in, I'll get half his pension and probably the kids, too. That's just how the courts work. I'm not worried. I stopped cold. There was a silence on her end, and then she laughed again, low and smug this time. Yeah, Greg, you'll finally get your sleepover. No more hiding. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just stood there with one foot on the top step, watching the door to our bedroom sit cracked open like it always did when she thought she was alone. A salary in uniform. Half my pension. The kids. Greg. I swallowed down the heat rising in my chest. My hand curled tight around the banister. Not because I wanted to hit anything, but because I needed to stay grounded. Everything I'd built, deployments, promotions, training, years of missed birthdays and anniversaries. Also, I could give them a stable life. And here she was, carving it up with a man named Greg over speakerphone. My brain wanted to charge through that door. My training told me not to. And for once, the training won. I backed down the stairs just as quietly as I came. I picked up my bag, walked out the door, and drove 10 minutes to a diner that never closed. I sat in the corner booth and stared into a black coffee for an hour, hearing her words loop over and over again. Claire wanted a divorce. Fine. She thought she'd walk away with half. Not a chance. She didn't know who she was dealing with, but she would. By the time I got home, again, an hour later, my plan had already started to form. And I smiled when I walked through the door, because Claire had no idea she'd already lost. When I came back through the front door the second time, I made sure to shut it a little louder. Claire, I called out, casual, like I hadn't been there before. Like I hadn't already heard her offer up my life and children like trade chips in a negotiation with Greg. A beat passed. Then her voice floated down, syrupy sweet. Mason. Surprise, I said, dropping my bag by the hall table. I walked toward the kitchen, forcing my face into a smile I didn't feel. She came around the corner fast, barefoot, and smiling like the woman I married. Her arms wrapped around me before I could pretend to go for a hug. Oh my God, you're back early, she said, laughing into my shoulder. You didn't tell me. I wanted to surprise you, I said, keeping my voice steady. The conference ended a day early. She leaned back and looked up at me with that well-practiced grin, the one she used when she wanted something. You should have told me. I would have cleaned up, made dinner. It's fine, I said. I'm just glad to be home. Just like that, her performance ended. She looked over her shoulder. The kids are upstairs. Nora's working on that volcano project, and Owen's watching some cartoon about a flying lizard or something. I nodded and headed up. I'll say hi. The second I walked into their rooms, everything else faded. Nora came barreling toward me, hugging my waist with her usual force. You're early, she said, beaming. Did they kick you out for being too smart? Something like that, I said, ruffling her hair. How's the volcano? Still exploding, she said proudly. Owen looked up from the tablet and smiled. Dad, did you bring snacks from the airport? Always, I said, handing him a crumpled bag of gummy worms from my jacket pocket. Don't tell your mom. He zipped his lips and grinned. For the next hour, I helped Nora paint cardboard lava and gave Owen a piggyback ride that nearly took out a lamp. Claire poked her head in a few times, offering a smile, but her eyes kept drifting to her phone. Each time it buzzed, she glanced at it like it was oxygen. Probably Greg. That night, after dinner, she said she had a headache and went to bed early. I kissed her on the forehead and told her to rest. Then I locked myself in my home office, powered up my laptop, and got to work. Emails, call logs, cloud backups, old credit card statements. I didn't just look, I documented. Screen grabs, PDFs, timelines. I set up a secure storage vault and labeled everything with military precision. You don't just confront betrayal. You build a case. I'd spent my career spotting patterns, following digital footprints, unraveling secrets. Now I was doing it in my own house. By the time midnight rolled around, I had my first real folder. Phase 1. Digital activity. Claire thought she was planning a quiet exit. She had no idea I'd already opened the file on her. The papers came on a Sunday. Claire waited until after pancakes. She played the whole thing out like it was some casual errand. Said she had to run to CVS, needed allergy meds. Instead, she came home holding a thick manila envelope. I was still at the table, sipping coffee while Nora and Owen took turns trying to flip pancakes with a spatula they weren't supposed to be touching. She walked into the dining room with that same rehearsed smile, her posture a little too straight, her eyes a little too wide. "Can I talk to you for a second?" she asked, nodding toward the living room. "Sure," I said, standing up slowly. I gave the kids a wink. "Don't burn the house down." Claire waited until we were alone. Then, with both hands, she placed the envelope on the coffee table like she was offering me a gift. I already knew what it was. "I think this is the best way forward," she said, her voice soft, like she was trying to sound sad. "We've just grown apart." I opened the envelope, pulled out the stack, and read the first line of the petition for dissolution of marriage. Standard legalese. Nothing personal, just the slow bureaucratic unraveling of 15 years. She probably expected me to panic, yell, cry. Instead, I reached for the pen sitting on the side table. It was the one she gave me for our 10th anniversary. Gold-plated, engraved with my initials. I'd kept it polished all these years. I uncapped it, signed the top sheet with a smooth, practiced hand, then clicked the cap shut. Claire blinked. "That's it." I nodded. "That's it." She wasn't ready for that. Her mouth twitched, like she didn't know whether to smile or scowl. I thought maybe we'd have a real conversation about this," she said. "You said what you needed to say," I replied. "I'm just making it easier." Her eyes narrowed, just for a second. "You do know I'll be taking what's mine, right? The house, half the pension, primary custody. That's how this works." I nodded again. "Sure." That was the moment she started to get uneasy. There was something in the way I wasn't fighting, like maybe she'd walked into the ring with a man who wasn't planning to throw punches. But she didn't realize I'd already cleared the battlefield. She didn't know I'd spent the last week moving my assets into a private trust through a legal proxy, that I'd already set up a separate account in Texas, with the bulk of my savings rerouted under a different LLC, that the car wasn't in my name anymore, and neither was the lake property she'd forgotten about. I learned early in intelligence work, the loudest reaction is always the weakest defense. That night, while she soaked in a bath and scrolled through Pinterest like she'd just finished a productive day, I sat in my office uploading photos, screenshots, metadata. I redacted what I didn't need and highlighted what I did. Then I drafted 2 affidavits, one anonymous, one not. Claire had declared war. She just didn't know I'd already fired the first shot. I took 2 weeks of personal leave. Told command I needed a break before the official divorce filings began. Nobody questioned it. Military life comes with a silent understanding about things like this. But I didn't spend my time on beaches or with old buddies. I spent it in shadows. Day 1, I started with Gregory Stephen Merritt, real estate broker, high-end properties, owner of a boutique firm in Arlington, a man whose online persona was all Rolexes, rooftop cocktails, and client satisfaction first smiles. I pulled his financial records from public databases, checked for business filings, searched his licensing board for complaints. Day 2, I sat outside his office in an unmarked rental. Watched him meet Claire in the alley around 11:40 a.m. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring. He kissed her like it wasn't the first time. Day 3, I ran photos through a timestamping app and geoagged the alley. Then I pulled phone records. Her number. His number. Dozens of late-night calls over the last 6 months. Many made while I was deployed. But Greg wasn't the only one. That Friday, I visited a guy I knew from Quantico. Ex-Marine turned PI. We shared stories over black coffee. Then he pulled a favor for me, background checks, gym memberships, anything tied to Claire. We found two more men. A personal trainer she saw for postnatal core strength after Owen was born. A private chef she hired for our anniversary in 2019. Both had photos with Claire in places they weren't supposed to be. The real surprise came from a minor league baseball player. That one dated back years. They'd met during a charity auction I'd paid for. Claire had coordinated the event. It made me sick to think about how long it had gone on. That weekend, while Claire took the kids to her parents' place for space, I sanitized the house. Not with bleach, with Intel work. I collected every piece of mail, dusted her drawers for receipts, even checked old backup drives. She'd saved an entire folder of photos from a ski trip in 2021. I had been deployed in Germany at the time. She was there with Greg. Same week she told me she had a spa weekend with her sister. She'd even smiled at the camera the same way she used to smile at me. The more I found, the less I felt. Anger burned out by data. Resentment dulled by documentation. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a mission. I labeled everything by category: emotional infidelity, financial negligence, custody risk factors, paternal uncertainty. That last one kept me up at night. The kids. I hadn't been able to shake something Owen said a few months ago. Mom says I have Greg's nose. At the time I laughed. Now I couldn't. So I waited for the right moment, a quiet Tuesday morning, and swapped out the toothbrushes from the kids' bathroom. Carefully. One of each. I placed them in sealed bags, labeled and time-stamped. I didn't want to know, but I had to. I paid extra for a rush on the paternity test. 3 business days. In the meantime, I documented every detail of Claire's movements, her locations, the meetings she claimed were volunteer events. She was either sloppy or confident. Probably both. The house felt colder with every page I added to the file. But I kept working. That's what you do when someone betrays you with a smile. You stop being the husband. You become the analyst. And I was almost ready to deliver the report. The email came on a Thursday. Subject line: confidential, DNA paternity results enclosed. I stared at it for a long minute before opening it. My heart didn't pound. My hands didn't shake. I just felt still. The document opened with the usual legal boilerplate, logos from the lab, disclaimers. Then the words I'd been expecting but still couldn't fully prepare for. Probability of paternity, 0%. Subject: Nora, excluded. Subject: Owen, excluded. I read it again. And again. Same result. Neither child was biologically mine. The silence in my office was deafening. Not even the hum of the desktop fan registered. I sat back in my chair, eyes locked on the screen, the cursor blinking at the bottom like it was waiting for me to say something. Do something. But I couldn't move. It wasn't the shock. I'd suspected it. It wasn't even the betrayal that was already documented in full. It was the sheer, unstoppable rush of memory. Nora, age 4, standing on the couch in her Halloween costume, a crooked little astronaut suit, insisting I call her Commander. Owen, 6 years old, crying after he fell off his bike, and me running out barefoot to scoop him up. Late nights with a feverish baby on my chest while Claire slept soundly, oblivious. I had been there for every scraped knee, every spelling test, every nightmare. I was there. I was their father. And yet, biologically, I wasn't. According to this piece of paper, I was no more than a generous man who got played, who raised someone else's children. I closed the laptop slowly, got up, locked the office door behind me, and sat down on the floor like a man who didn't want to touch the world anymore. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe an hour. The light in the hallway didn't change. Nothing changed, except everything. Later that night, I went upstairs and peeked in on them. Nora had fallen asleep with a book still in her lap, A Wrinkle in Time, the same one I read to her last year. Owen was curled up on his side, hugging that beat-up stuffed frog I'd bought him from a gas station in Kentucky during a road trip. They looked peaceful. And for a moment, I hated Claire more than I thought possible. Not for the lies, not for the affairs, not even for the betrayal, but for stealing something sacred from them. For turning their lies into a secret without their consent. I could never unsee the test results. But I also couldn't unlove those kids. So I made a choice. I wouldn't tell them. Not now. Maybe not ever. If one day they wanted answers, I'd be honest. But for now, I would protect them the way I always had, completely. I printed the results, placed them in the custody leverage folder inside my secure file case, and snapped the latch shut. Claire thought she had power because she knew how to play the family court system. Because she had seduced the right man at the right time, and told the right lies. But the truth was heavier than any of her plans. And I had it all, including the part that would destroy her in ways she hadn't even imagined yet. But I wasn't ready to detonate it. Not yet. The gala was held at the Army-Navy Club in Washington, D.C. Formal, wear only. Dress blues, evening gowns, polished floors, and polished smiles. Claire arrived on Greg's arm. I saw them from across the ballroom, laughing like teenagers. Her hand clung to his arm, her posture a little too proud, her red dress a little too bright. She always liked to be the center of the room. Tonight, she was. Until I walked in. I didn't sneak in this time. No stealth. No subtlety. I came in wearing my full ceremonial uniform, medals, aiguillette, the works. A visual wall of brass and order. Heads turned. People stood a little straighter. Claire looked up halfway through sipping champagne and nearly choked when she saw me. I smiled. The colonel hosting the event came to shake my hand. I made small talk, nodded politely, and let him lead me toward the cluster of tables reserved for VIP guests. Claire and Greg were seated at the end of that group, right next to a few senior officers and their spouses. Perfect. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. On the front, in block letters, Claire R. Thomas, personal and confidential. I walked up to their table and set the envelope in front of her without a word. She looked down at it, then back up at me. "What is this?" she asked, her smile tight. I leaned down slightly, just enough so only they could hear. "Consider it the courtesy you never extended to me." Greg reached for the envelope and started opening it. Claire placed a hand over his. "Not now," she whispered. But he had already pulled the papers halfway out. And there, in plain view, was the heading. Paternity testing, final results. Greg froze. "What the hell is this?" Claire glanced down, her color draining as she saw what he was holding. Her hand trembled. Greg flipped to the second page, scanning with quick, jerky eyes. Then he went rigid. 0%, he hissed. "You said they were his." Claire opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "You told me the kids were his. You said it didn't matter because it'd make the divorce cleaner." A ripple of silence started spreading from their table outward. The colonel's wife stopped mid-sentence and stared. Someone at a nearby table leaned over, whispering. Greg stood suddenly, sending his chair screeching across the floor. "You lied to me," he said, loud enough for several heads to turn. "You let me think I was just a side piece. But this is insane." Claire was flushed red now, her voice barely a whisper. "Greg, sit down." But Greg was already walking away, the envelope still in his hand. Claire tried to smile again, tried to recover, but it was too late. The moment had fractured. People were watching. Murmurs spread like cracks in glass. I turned and walked back toward the doors, my hands steady. Before I left, I looked back once and caught Claire sitting alone at the table, her fork untouched, her face blank. The napkin in her lap was crumpled in a fist. She thought she'd control the narrative, that she'd walk into that room and bask in her new life, her upgrade. But I had rewritten the ending, and I made sure everyone saw it. One envelope, 3 pages. That was all it took to turn her triumph into a slow, very public collapse. I picked the kids up from school the next day. Claire was supposed to get them. It was her afternoon. But I texted her that morning, "Don't come. They'll be with me." She didn't respond. In the rearview mirror, I watched Nora stare out the window, silent, arms folded. Owen was chewing on his hoodie string like he always did when he didn't know what to say. They didn't ask why I came instead of their mom. They knew something was wrong. When we got home, I made grilled cheese and tomato soup. Owen slurped. Nora didn't touch hers. "Is Mom in trouble?" she asked finally, not looking at me. I set my spoon down. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged. "People at school are whispering. Someone's mom said something about a scene at a party." I sighed and leaned forward. "Okay, I think we should talk." Owen stopped slurping. Nora looked up. They both just waited. I took a deep breath. "You know I love you, right? Nothing in the world changes that." Owen nodded slowly. Nora narrowed her eyes. "Even if you and Mom split?" "Yes," I said. "Even then. Especially then." She tilted her head. "So, are you getting divorced?" I hesitated. "Yes. Your mom and I are going to live separately. It's not your fault. And it won't change how much I love you." She nodded slowly, lips tight. "Did she cheat on you?" I blinked. She was 11, but her voice was cold. Precise. I didn't lie. "Yes." Owen's face scrunched up. "With who?" I shook my head. That's not important. What matters is that it wasn't your fault. And it doesn't change anything between us. He dropped his spoon into the bowl and looked down. Are we still your kids? I could have cried right then. I stood up, walked over, and pulled both of them into a hug. Of course you are. Nothing changes that. Not ever. They held on tighter than I expected. Later that night, Claire came by. I was in the garage tightening a loose cabinet hinge when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the front door. She stood there in yoga pants and a windbreaker, no makeup, hair tied back. No Greg. No show. I just want to see them, she said. I nodded and stepped aside. Go ahead. She walked into the living room where they were watching a movie. Owen sat up, confused. Nora didn't move. Hi, baby, Claire said, her voice soft. Nora didn't answer. Claire walked over to the couch and tried to put a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Nora pulled away. You lied to Daddy, she said, eyes glued to the screen. And you lied to us. Claire knelt down beside her. Sweetheart, Nora stood and walked to the stairs. I don't want to talk to you. Owen sat frozen, his eyes flicking between them. Claire looked stunned. Nora, please. But she was already gone. Owen looked up at her, torn. Are you going to move away? Claire's voice cracked. I don't know yet. He looked at me. Can I stay here? You can always stay here, I said, kneeling beside him. Claire stood. This isn't over. I straightened. It's over when the court says it is. She looked like she wanted to say more, but instead, she turned and left. Quietly this time. The next morning, I checked my email. The emergency order freezing Claire's access to the joint accounts and retirement fund had been approved. I stared at the screen for a moment, then closed the laptop. Some things, it turns out, could be saved. Others, like trust, don't grow back. The courtroom was small, clean, and clinical, nothing like the bombastic scenes people imagine from TV. No raised voices, no dramatic objections. Just polished wood, legal pads, and the steady tick of the clock behind the bench. Claire sat on the other side of the aisle, dressed in a navy blue blazer, hair pinned up like she was going to a job interview. Greg wasn't there. I wasn't surprised. My lawyer, Captain Reed, was a former JAG officer who had tried cases in 3 combat zones. Calm, sharp, lethal when needed. She'd warned me that family court wasn't about justice. It was about paperwork, preparation, and patience. Fortunately, I had all 3. We started with the basics. Claire's petition for divorce, her claim to shared custody, half the house, and a portion of my pension. Captain Reed smiled politely. We contest all of it. Claire's attorney, some mid-tier civilian with too much hair gel, didn't know what was coming. First, we introduced the evidence of infidelity. Photos, timestamps, hotel receipts, message logs. Her voice on speakerphone with Greg. The judge raised an eyebrow but stayed quiet. Then came the financial deception. Captain Reed presented 3 years' worth of bank transfers from our joint accounts to Claire's private one. Luxury expenses. Gifts. Flights. The judge asked for clarification. These were not disclosed in your client's financial affidavit. Claire's lawyer cleared his throat. We weren't aware of those particular transfers. Captain Reed didn't flinch. We were. Then came the paternity results. Enclosed in a sealed folder. No drama. Just the facts. Both children were confirmed to have no biological relation to Mr. Thomas, she said, her voice steady. Despite this, he has raised them fully and continues to do so without question, without hesitation. The judge looked at me. And you're seeking full custody? Yes, sir, I said. They're my children, no matter what the test says. Claire's head jerked slightly at that. Her mouth opened and closed again. By the time the final exhibits were logged, character references, school records, even a notarized statement from Owen's teacher about his stability since moving in full-time with me, the courtroom felt like a slow landslide, shifting heavily in my direction. Claire never looked at me. Not once. After lunch recess, the judge returned and read his ruling. It wasn't close. Primary physical custody, awarded to me. The house, retained under my name. Pension, untouched. Child support, waived, at my request. Claire's request for spousal maintenance, denied. Claire's access to any joint or retirement assets, permanently revoked. By the time the judge closed the file and stepped off the bench, Claire looked like someone had emptied her lungs. Outside the courthouse, she caught up to me near the parking garage. She wasn't angry, not anymore. She was pale, drained, stunned. You destroyed me, she said. I turned slowly, looked her in the eyes. No, I said. You destroyed yourself. She blinked. I just turned on the lights. Then I walked away. She didn't follow. 3 months passed. Summer gave way to early fall, the leaves in Arlington shifting from green to burnt orange. The kids settled into their new routines. New school schedule, new dinner table seating, new rhythm. Nora started volunteering at the local library on weekends. Owen joined a junior robotics club and insisted we name his project Captain Frogbot. Our home, once tense and hollow, started to feel like a living space again, not a crime scene. And me? I breathed. I got back to morning runs. Rejoined my chess club on base. Took a few calls from leadership asking if I was ready for reassignment. I told them not yet, not until the kids were fully adjusted. Then, there was Lydia. We'd met months ago at the intelligence conference in Stuttgart, before the whole thing collapsed back home. She was a war correspondent, sharp, funny, didn't flinch at hard truths. We'd emailed back and forth for a while, but after everything with Claire, I hadn't pursued it. Still, when she passed through DC for a piece she was writing, we met for coffee. That turned into lunch. Then a walk through the National Mall. Then dinner. Just me, Lydia, and a couple of shared stories that didn't require apologies or edits. The kids took to her slowly. Nora warmed up first. Lydia asked her real questions, didn't talk down, didn't pretend. Owen was more guarded. But when Lydia fixed the Wi-Fi without calling me, he declared her technically a wizard. It wasn't perfect. Nothing is. But it felt real. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Claire showed up. I was home from a short field training trip. The house smelled like leftover lasagna and wet socks. Nora was upstairs. Owen was trying to program Frogbot to dance. I opened the door and found her standing there. No umbrella, hair soaked, makeup streaked. She looked thinner, worn down, not like herself. Or maybe for the first time, she actually did. I didn't know where else to go, she said. I didn't invite her in. She stepped back under the awning, arms crossed. I lost the apartment. Greg's gone. My accounts are frozen, my credit's ruined. I can't even rent a studio without a cosigner. I let the silence sit. I'm not asking for much, she said quickly. Just a place to stay for a few weeks. Or maybe help with rent. For the kids' sake. There it was. The familiar hook. Only this time, I didn't bite. I stepped outside, pulling the door nearly closed behind me. I'll wire you 1 month of rent, I said. So Nora and Owen know you're okay. After that, you're on your own. She blinked like I'd slapped her. That's it. That's it. She looked at the ground. I didn't think you could turn cold like this. I stared at her, steady. You should have paid more attention during the marriage. She flinched. I turned, opened the door, and stepped back inside. Owen looked up. Was that Mom? I nodded. She's okay. Just needed help with something. He didn't press. Nora didn't come down. And just like that, the door shut behind Claire for the final time. Not slammed. Just shut. Saturday morning came with the smell of cinnamon waffles and dog breath. Owen sat on the kitchen floor feeding strips of bacon to Max, our rescue mutt with the appetite of a bear and the loyalty of a soldier. Nora sat at the table, laptop open, rattling off questions for her English essay, while Lydia poured coffee and answered like she'd known her all her life. It wasn't loud, exactly, just full. The kind of noise that meant people were living here again, not just surviving. I stood at the stove flipping waffles, watching the sun crawl across the tile. Dad, do you think betrayal counts as a theme? Nora asked, adjusting her glasses. I looked over. In literature or life? She smirked. Both. Definitely, Lydia chimed in. Especially if the character learns something from it. Owen grunted. Captain Frogbot would never betray anyone. We all laughed. Max barked. It was chaos. Good chaos. My phone buzzed on the counter. A new text from Claire. Taking a job in Denver. Starting next month. We'll give the kids a proper goodbye before I go. Thanks for helping before. I won't bother you again. I stared at it for a second. No anger. No apology, either. Just distance. I typed a simple reply. Good luck. And that was that. I dropped the phone back on the counter, flipped the last waffle, and called everyone over. Family trip planning time, I said. Owen dropped a bacon strip and bolted to the table. Hiking, right? We agreed. Nora rolled her eyes. You agreed. I said I wouldn't die on a trail. Lydia laughed. Compromise. Somewhere scenic with Wi-Fi. We pulled out an old trail map from Shenandoah. I kept it folded in my desk drawer for years, waiting for the right time. Owen pointed out campsites with streams. Nora circled one with a lodge. Lydia picked the trail that passed by an overlook called Sunset Rock. We all agreed that sounded like the place. Later that night, after the kids were asleep and Max had curled up under the table, Lydia and I sat on the back porch wrapped in a shared blanket. The air was crisp, and the neighborhood was quiet except for the soft hum of sprinklers and the occasional owl. I never thought I'd end up here, I said, watching the stars. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Where? In suburbia with waffles and essays? In peace, I said quietly. After all that noise. Lydia nodded. You built this. I looked through the kitchen window, plates drying in the rack, school flyers pinned to the fridge, a dog bed in the corner. Yeah, I did. Not out of revenge. Not from rage. But piece by piece, after the fire burned out. Inside, Nora's essay sat open, unfinished. I saw the first line on the screen from where I stood earlier. Sometimes family isn't who you come from. It's who shows up, stays, and never leaves, even after the worst. I reached over and squeezed Lydia's hand. We weren't rebuilding a broken home anymore. We were making a new one.